Hello everybody, welcome to episode 90 of Show Viewers. Today we'll be going over episode 1158 of the One Piece anime. Now, this episode starts off with us seeing as the crew kind of discusses what to do in Block Kingdom, and ultimately Luffy's like, I'm going to go explore, I'm going to go to the temple, well actually this doesn't happen first, but first we see as they encounter an actual citizen of the Block Kingdom who is riding a grasshopper, and they get to talking with him. He just reveals kind of stuff about their gods and stuff like that, they're really just big animals, and he tells them where the palace of the Sun King is, or the Sun God. But yeah, so Luffy's like, you know what, I'm gonna go to explore and do this. So he goes running after to go and get into shenanigans, and we see as everyone's kind of like following after him because, like, I mean, they're trying to stop him from actually angering an actual, what they believe to be a god. But yeah, so he's going along and is going to the Sun God's palace. But ultimately, in his endeavors, he runs into a wall. And he runs into it because it looks like a mirror. He looks like someone in similar Elbaf attire is running at him. He doesn't realize it's himself, and he runs into it and shatters the mirror. And we see as everyone's like astonished, they're like, whoa, because they presumed that they were actually in an area, but actually they had been in an enclosure that had a mirror in front of it and like a netting behind it. So ultimately they end up cutting on this netting. Zoro ends up cutting down the netting. He jumps up in the air, cuts it all down. And they just get to investigating and talking. And apparently what was the case was they were inside like essentially a toy domain. And in this toy domain, there was a bunch of humans who had been, I guess, not really inputted in there, but like planted in there, and organisms like other animals and stuff like that as well. But yeah, so how it maintained the illusion of being a kingdom, like an actual kingdom, was that it had mirrors on all sides of the cage so that it reflected what was within. And it looked as if the sky just kept continuing and all that stuff. So that was how they were kept in there. And we see as Sanji has to have his gag of being a pervert per episode, and he's like, yo, Nami, can I clean the woman's bathroom? And she's like, no. And that's presumably to replace the mirrors with these essentially see-through mirrors that make it look like nothing is awry. But it actually is. But yeah. So we see this, and they get to go walking around in this like main room area and stuff. And we see as Luffy notices there's a bunch of blocks, and they realize that this whole thing had been created. It was all a mirage and everything. But yeah, through this, they're just walking around, talking, doing things, and then ultimately they see as some large animals start pulling up. We see as some mice start like climbing up onto the table that they're on. We see as a bird swoops down, and as a snake that Luffy runs into comes down. So we get to see a pretty cool transition of Luffy into Gear 5. I don't know why Luffy's going into Gear 5 to fight animals now, but yeah, he goes Gear 5. I know I say like I haven't already read this and like know what's going to happen, but I mean still. But he goes Gear 5, and he's fighting. We see as Zoro ends up fighting the bird. Well, actually, Luffy punches the bird up a little bit, but then Zoro fights the bird. Luffy predominantly fights the snake. His name's like Hilmgunder or something like that. Or Hilmgunder. And we see as Sanji deals with some of the mice. Yeah, so we see as they're fighting everything, going crazy. And we see as we actually get a look at the Sun God. And the Sun God is this big, like, hulking dude with, like, a horse skull on his face, and, like, antlers. It's not a horse skull, it's like a deer skull, or a moose skull, or something like that. And it's got antlers, and got a long red robe with, like, pink shoes and a staff that looks like a sun. We see he's slowly progressing towards his room as the Straw Hats are slowly beating down the animals and, I guess, calming down the situation. Yeah, ultimately Luffy ends up beating the snake, and all the other animals are ultimately defeated. And then we see as the Sun God pulls up, and he's like, yo, what are you doing in here? You're going to pay for destroying my kingdom, because they destroyed his little playset. But yeah, so after this, we see then as all of the Straw Hats are like, you know what, we got to run away from this dude because he might actually be powerful. So they run back into the Block Kingdom, and ultimately they run into that cat lion thing that they beat up, and Luffy's like, oh, you're gonna listen to me this time. So they ultimately get their noble steed, which is the cat, the big cat, and they start running off from the Sun God, who has now pursued them into the Block Kingdom and threatening revenge. So that's kind of where that chapter ends. Now, well, not that chapter, but that episode. But yeah, so I'm honestly really curious about how far we're gonna get into the Elbaf arc this year, because I believe we're supposed to have two cores, C-O-U-R, of I believe the first one is 13 and the second one is 12 episodes. And I know with at the pace we're going right now, we will not be able to get to the end of the Elbaf arc with this. So I really wonder where the end point is going to be, like where the middle point, where the end point is going to be. I wonder if for this set of episodes, it'll be like running up on Loki, because I know that's where, where is it at? Oh, it's over here. 1 second. Can I grab that right now? Okay, no, it's behind that pop. But yeah, so that's where the, I believe it's 111th manga volume of One Piece actually ends. It ends after Luffy kind of runs into not Luffy. Oh my gosh, Luffy runs into Loki, and they're kind of talking and stuff like that. So that's kind of where that one ends. So I really do wonder where this core will end. Because, like, I would presume, like I said, I presume it ended at that point, so it'd be, like, consistent with the manga. But I'm still kind of worried about how they're not really translating, like, a lot per episode. Like, there's not a lot of meat on the bone per these episodes. And so I'm really worried about how quickly they're going to be able to translate through all this stuff. Because, I mean, yes, going to seasonal is better because most of the time you get more content per episode. However, we haven't really seen that yet. I believe it's still on a almost like a one chapter per episode basis, which is kind of concerning because then we know with that One Piece is going to get very behind. But I mean, we can't have weekly with Elbaf because I mean, if they did have weekly, they would ultimately catch up to Oda, and we don't want them catching up to Oda because we gotta get like even more stagnated like release times or filler. I mean, I personally like One Piece filler, but I don't want it if I don't have to have it. So this, I believe, will end up working out, but it is going to be concerning about when the Elbaf arc will end, because I know it probably will not be ending this year. I mean, that doesn't really matter, because I mean, we're still going to get the manga, we're still going to see the manga ending and all that good stuff. But yeah, I was just kind of voicing some concerns there about the release schedule of the One Piece anime at the moment. But yeah, that's all there really was for episode 1158 of One Piece, and all I really have for episode 90 of Show Review. So thank you very much for watching.